Thanks again for coming. Again, this is our 7th in the series, so nice crowd tonight. And my name's Jenni Remillard. If you don't already know me, I've been with Newport Parks and Recreation since 2017. And before that, I was with a variety of organizations doing informal education for about 10 years. So I'm one of those weird people that actually likes getting up in front of people and talking. So it's always fun to get up and share things I'm excited about with other people. So this was a really fascinating place to visit. And when we decided to do this series, I thought it would be a really fun thing to talk about. So, and since we're going to be talking about military tonight, I figured I'd share. I'm also a veteran. I spent 4 years in the Army, and most of it was with the 98th Army Band in Fort Rucker, Alabama, which is very different than Alaska. So I wanted to ask before we get started too, do we have any Adak veterans here tonight? No? Has anybody ever been to Adak before? Well, you have? Have you? What were you doing up there? Environmental cleanup when you're shutting down the base. So lots to do up there on that front. Has anybody ever heard of it before? This, yeah? How about you guys? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we do have some Adak veterans watching online too. So my dad, of course, and then one of his Navy friends is watching from Wisconsin. And we might have also at least one other that let me use some of the photos on here. So Joe, if you're out there, thank you for letting me use photos on your website. Like I said, it's a really fascinating place. Someone described it once to me as almost otherworldly out there. And I was like, that's a pretty good description out there, because just the landscape itself is beautiful. And then you've got kind of this ghost town aspect of what it's become after the Navy's left it. You know, it was they abandoned the base in '97, and it's just been kind of rotting out there since. And then just the wild weather out there, and you'll see as we go. So there's my dad. He was up there in 1972 to 1975, and he'd been talking about going back for years, and last summer we finally did. So that's him standing in the old office of the shop where he used to work when we were up there. So tonight I will talk to you a little bit about the natural history of the island, and then also the history of it, the human history of it, and then I'll give you kind of a little tour of the base that Dad gave us to show you like where he was and what it looks like now. And we have some of his old pictures so you can see what it looked like back in the 70s too. So Adak's a long, long ways from anywhere, about 1,200 miles from Anchorage, and it's one of the Aleutian Islands. It's on that island chain out there. And when people think of the Aleutian Islands, a lot of times they think of Dutch Harbor. So that's where Dutch Harbor is. And you can see that it's further out than that. So it's kind of out there in the middle of the Aleutians. And it is the westernmost town in the United States. It is still a town. There are still a few people that live there. But it is far, far from anywhere. And it's also on the Ring of Fire. So if you're familiar with geology at all, it's on the chain of volcanoes that rings the Pacific. We are also on the Ring of Fire. Our Cascade volcanoes are part of the Ring of Fire. So they are formed along these plate boundaries, and it's a subduction zone. So the same thing we have off our coast, we have one plate that's being subducted under another, and as it gets pushed underneath this other plate, it starts to melt, and that magma, as it melts, it starts to come back up and it forms these volcanoes. And in our case here, it's the Cascade volcanoes. Up there, it's the Alaskan chain, or the Aleutian chain, that is formed from that subduction zone. And so if we go back, you can see this is where the subduction zone is happening right here. So there's a trench there. That's where that plate is getting subducted underneath the other one. And then these are all volcanic islands along here. So if we zoom in on Adak, we can see it is a very irregularly shaped island. There's lots of bays, lots of lakes, all kinds of lakes out there. And there's lots of other little islands around it too. So it's very rugged terrain, and lots of steep cliffs, lots of offshore rocks. Looks kind of familiar, right? Looks a little bit like around here. Lots of volcanic legacy, really, if you look at the landscape out there. Like this kind of looks like something you might see around here too. This is that columnar basalt that you see here in Oregon as well. We also have that volcanism here in Oregon where we see stuff like that too. Come on in. And so some of the landscape is a little familiar out there. This is Mount Moffett, so that is the tallest volcano that's on the island. And then Adak is the other volcano, so this is it up here. And if we look at our map, this is Moffett here, and this is Adak. So they're up at the top there. And they are still active. They occasionally will let off a little steam or a little puff of ash, but they haven't had any major eruptions for quite a long time. And then it is covered in tundra. And the tundra up there, this was my first time experiencing tundra, so I don't have anything to compare it to. But the tundra there was it was grasses, like some of it was really thick bladed grasses, some of it was really tall. And then also a lot of these cute little ground plants. These strawberries were very delicious, by the way. They're a little tiny, but they were very tasty. And then these were crowberries, which I think were edible, but we did not know that at the time, so we let them be. And then lots of little mosses and lichens and things like that. Some wildflowers. I don't think these are native, but I am not 100% sure. But there were other flowers that we saw up there as well. So lots of beautiful plants, and the tundra was so nice and green while we were there. It does turn brown in the wintertime, and then of course it gets covered in snow. And very little trees. So this is what's jokingly referred to as the Adak National Forest. The sign says you are now entering and leaving the Adak National Forest. And it was planted there for morale. There were not very many trees on the island. There's this one, and then there's another little grove of trees that are up there, but they were planted. They're not native trees up there. And the weather is very tough on the trees. They don't do well up there. So unfortunately, when we went, the sign was gone. I was so sad the sign was gone. Dad thought maybe it was being repaired, but yeah, the sign's all gone. So it is a subpolar oceanic climate, which means that it has lots of cloudy days, lots of rain, kind of moderate temperatures, doesn't get super cold, doesn't get super hot, not a whole lot of sunny days, windy. That sounds a little familiar, right? Kind of sounds like here. So I got curious. I wanted to compare what's the weather like between Adak and Alaska, or Adak and Newport. So average annual rainfall, who do you think gets more? Here? We do get a little bit more, but not a whole lot. So we're pretty close, 68 versus 61.5. Adak gets a little less. What about average high in August? Who's higher? We're higher, but again, not by a ton. 64 versus 55 is the average high on Adak. Average low in January. Who's lower in January? They are, but actually, again, not by a whole lot. It's pretty close. Average low is 27 degrees on Adak. Average low in Newport's 30 degrees. So I was surprised by that one. Average sunny days. We actually get less. I was surprised because Dad used to say that sometimes they'd take a day off just because the sun came out. But we have less sunny days than Adak. I was surprised on that one. Highest wind gust. This one also surprised me. We have the highest wind gust too, but this is an anomaly because this wind gust happened during the Columbus Day storm in the 60s. Yeah, that big, huge windstorm that did a lot of damage over the Pacific Northwest in the 1960s. Adak they get a lot of storms. It's known as the birthplace of the winds. And so when I looked up the average wind speed, the monthly average wind speed for Adak, it was like 30 miles an hour for the whole month. And here it averaged, we get some months that are windy, some months that are not so windy. So Adak, while we have the highest record wind gusts, they definitely have a more sustained wind speed over the months. But this one, number of days with measurable precipitation. Yeah, you think it might be us because we get more rain, but whoa, it's Adak. So they have, so our rain, you guys know, it comes down a lot. It comes down all at once sometimes. And then we get in the summer, we get our dry season and it hardly rains at all. But in Adak, it's spread out. And so they get a lot of days, 341 days with rain versus Newport with 171 days with measurable precipitation. And what's that? Yeah, we got lucky with the weather when we were there. I was surprised. So Adak is actually the second rainiest city after Hilo, Hawaii. So they get a lot of rain as far as number of days of rain. And then where they really beat us, though, is snowfall. So this picture is a little misleading, though. I asked my dad about this picture. He sent me this picture. This is from the 70s. And that wind, it blows drifts. And so he said this was an area that got drifts all the time. They were constantly having to plow this out. And even though they get an average of 100 inches, because of that precipitation being spread out, the snow rarely exceeds 1 to 2 feet in depth. And you know us, we hardly ever get snow. And if we do, it's gone by 10 o'clock and they've already canceled school for the whole day. So, but yeah, the snow is not as much as you would think up there. So because of all that precipitation, there's lots of water. It's very wet up there. There's some great streams up there, and it supports a lot of salmon. That's one of the wildlife up there. We saw sockeye salmon while we were up there. There's also chum salmon and coho salmon and lots of pink salmon. So 4 species of salmon are up there. The only one that's missing is the Chinook salmon. They don't have Chinook up there. So a lot of people go up there to go fishing for salmon and other fish too. They do offshore fishing as well.
And those pictures are during their spawning stage.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this is after they come in to spawn, and yeah, some of them we saw some sockeyes and we saw some pinks, and some of them looked pretty ragged. They'd been in for a while, so they kind of start to disintegrate after they've been in for a while, because salmon, they die after they spawn, so they start to fall apart after a while. The pinks only live 2 years, even if you prevent them from spawning, which is interesting. So that's it. They're just on a 2-year time cycle. We also saw lots of ptarmigan up there. They are about the size of a small chicken. When we were there in August, they were just starting to get their winter feathers. They don't migrate, and so they want to be camouflaged in the wintertime. So they get those nice white feathers. These guys don't fly very well. They kind of, if we're driving or you're walking along, they kind of spook up like a pheasant, fly a little ways, and then they just go right back down. So they're pretty easy to hunt. People hunt them, but there's lots of ptarmigan there. There's also lots of other birds up there. Adak is a very popular destination for birders. This is definitely not an exhaustive list. Part of Adak is part of the wildlife refuge up there, and there's this big, huge list of all these different types of birds that you can find, what time of year you can find them, because some birds are just there seasonally migrating, other birds are there year-round, and again, some of these people will go hunting, especially I think those emperor goose, people will hunt those. So lots of different types of birds, lots of eagles. We saw eagles everywhere. Ravens, you can find ravens up there. Most of these probably look familiar to you because we have most of these birds here as well, except for I don't think we have these here, parasitic Jaegers. And if you're wondering why the heck a bird is called parasitic, it's because it steals its food from other birds. It lets the other birds do the work, and then it comes and snatches it. So that's why it has that name. But these are pigeon guillemots. We have these here in Oregon. That's the black oyster catcher. We have these guys on the beach. They're the ones that make all the racket when you get too close to their territory. They make all kinds of noise. Tufted puffins, we don't see these very often unless you go to the aquarium. But we do have them here, and of course, everywhere. And you can see a lot of these guys if you go down to Seal Rock State Park. Maybe not, I don't know if they're, do you know if they're pelagic or if they're just regular cormorants? I don't know. But there's cormorants at Seal Rock State Park. You can see them up on that big rock there that's called the Elephant's Back. There's a lot of them that nest up there on that rock. And there's little songbirds there too. So some of them migrate, some of them don't. The rock sandpiper is another shorebird, but the rest of these are little songbirds that live up there. So lots of different types of birds up there. There are caribou there as well. They are not native. They were placed there in the 50s as kind of a living food bank just in case. So if there was ever a problem, they wanted to have caribou there in case they needed some food and they couldn't get supplies. So unfortunately, because there are no natural predators for them, their population tends to get really big and then crash and then, you know, goes through these cycles. And so people come to hunt caribou as well so they can try to keep a control on the population. Also marine mammals, we saw some seals up there and lots of sea otters. I believe there's also sea lions up there as well, and whales, different types of whales up there. Orcas and baleen whales. This is a fin whale. So there's whales out there as well. And so as far as human history, excuse me, the first people that lived there were the native people that came down off the land bridge, and they were obviously there forever. And their word for themselves in their own language is the unang, which I hope I pronounced right. And then Aleut, you may have heard that word before, that came from the Russians. That's kind of what the Russians kind of made for that word for them. And they did live on Adak. They have found archaeological evidence of their dwellings on Adak. Because they didn't have trees, they made subterranean dwellings. They would use whale bones or driftwood or things like that to support, and they would dig out these dwellings in the earth, and they would live in those. They would use kayaks to hunt, and then of course the sustenance, hunting, gathering, things like that. And so that they lived on the island. And then the people in the Aleutian Islands had some of the earliest contact with Europeans because they were so close to Russia. So there was a voyage in 1741 from Russia, and they came to the Aleutian Islands looking for fur. And as we all know, contact with Europeans didn't go so well for many native people. Disease, conflicts, a lot of the population did not survive. And then for a variety of reasons, by 1830, there were only Russians on Adak. There were still some native people coming to the island for hunting and things like that, but there were no permanent settlements of native people on Adak after 1830. And then the United States purchases Alaska in 1867. Fur trade continues. Population of fur-bearing animals drops drastically because humans are good at overharvesting things. And so Teddy Roosevelt creates this wildlife refuge in 1913 to help protect the animals, the fisheries, the birds. And so today, over half of Adak, the southern half of the island, is still part of that refuge. The northern half was given back to the Aleuts when the Navy left. And Alaska does tribes a little differently than we do. They're called corporations. So it's the Aleut Corporation. And their structure, I think, is slightly different, and the way they do things are a little differently, but it's called the Aleut Corporation. And so when you go there, you have to get a land use permit from them. It's like $40, and you pay that when you get off the plane so that you can be there. But that is the map of the refuge and then the Aleut land up there. So, oh, question, yes. We flew from Anchorage. So Alaska Airlines flies there twice a week, and it's a pretty good sized plane. I don't know about year round, but probably. So yeah, it is expensive though. So I think our tickets were like $1,500 a piece. So yeah. From Anchorage. Well, I think that was from Portland to Anchorage to out there, I think. Yeah, so it was pretty spendy, but. I will show you a better one later, but there was a base here, and then there's some, Dad was stationed out here, and then there were a few other little outposts here and there. But I'll get into more detail for that in a little bit. So during World War II, Alaska, people are starting to realize Alaska has kind of a strategic position out there in the Pacific. Japan starts, looking at it as like, this is kind of, northern Pacific, a way to control. And if you, it's kind of hard to like think about it without like actually looking at a globe, and I didn't bring one, but if you're looking at a sphere, it's actually less miles to go this way than it is to go straight across. So if you're on a ship or a plane, if you ever look at your flight path, if you're going like far, you actually kind of curve, and it's less miles. So they were like, maybe we should be looking at this. There's not a lot of population up there. There's space to take for bases that we could then attack the west coast of the United States for. The United States is already thinking about this as well. And of course, everybody knows the strategic position of Hawaii. We're pretty familiar about Hawaii's role in the war. Pearl Harbor was attacked. And so Alaska is kind of something that, we need to get a handle on Alaska too. They're starting to think about all this. And so this kind of sets off what's known as the Aleutian Campaign. And so the United States they break a code that the Japanese are thinking about going to Alaska. They don't know where exactly, but they know they're looking at this area. And so the United States sends some people to a couple of different areas. There's one in Alaska and a couple of other different spots. They send not a whole lot of people though. They set up a couple of bases up there. The Japanese come and they think that nobody is on Alaska. And so they think that it's just a sitting duck. We're going to take it and we're going to set up a base there. And so they attack June 3rd and 4th in 1942. But they did not expect the Americans to be there. And so they were kind of surprised at the resistance that they found. They did do some damage. We did lose some Americans, but because of the resistance that they met there, they were like, okay, we're gonna back off here. And they were going to go to Adak and take Adak. They weren't aware that there was nobody on Adak at that time, at least military. But the weather was so bad that they didn't get to Adak, and instead they went to Kiska, which is a small island. There were only 10 men stationed there. And they were quickly able to capture those men, except for one who actually survived out on the tundra for like 50 days before he finally surrendered because he was starving and cold. And but they were able to take Kiska, and then they took Attu the next day. And Attu did have a village, a native village. There was a small population of natives there. And unfortunately, they did send those people to a POW camp, and not everyone made it home. But they were there on these two islands. Those were the two that they occupied. The United States said, this is not going to happen on our watch. And so they started sending people to the Aleutians to take care of the situation. And so in August 1st is when Adak's military history or military time begins. They came in and they started leveling out areas for runways. And in 10 days, they were landing planes there, which is pretty amazing. You saw pictures of how rugged the landscape is there, like 10 days. So you think of how in the heck did they land planes there in 10 days? They used this stuff. It's this metal, yeah. They used that stuff so they could ship it up. So all they had to do was level the ground underneath of it. And then they could put this stuff down and you can land a plane on it. And we actually found some of it while we were up there. There's all kinds of stuff laying around up there. Old buildings, junk, furniture, machines. I mean, it's just here, there, everywhere. There's piles of stuff. There's buildings. There's just stuff in the grass. It's a really interesting place. But yeah, that's how they were able to start landing planes in 10 days. And they started amassing troops, ships. They had about 90,000 troops up there getting ready to retake the islands. And so accommodations were a little less luxurious on land. I'm sure Dad is out there thinking, oh God, about staying in these tents on Adak. But yeah, they had tents on land, they had people on ships. And then in May, so it's been almost a year since the Japanese landed on these other two islands, they go to Attu, and the Battle of Attu takes almost a month. And it was a pretty bloody battle. These islands, they're wet, they're foggy, they're rainy, the weather. And so it was a pretty rough battle. And they, the Japanese actually, in kind of a last ditch effort, charged through the American lines, and it was hand-to-hand combat at the end. And there were only 28 Japanese soldiers at the end that they were able to take alive. So it was a big battle. And there were over 2,300 Japanese lost and over 500 Americans lost. And so if you go to Attu today, nobody lives there today, but if you're able to get out there, there is a memorial there. They did not allow the villagers that were able to come back from the POW camps, they were not allowed to go back to Attu. But recently they did a ceremony out there with the descendants, and I think maybe there were a couple of people that were still alive that they were able to take out there. So yeah, it was quite the battle. And then they still needed to retake Kiska. But unknowns to the Americans and also the Canadians, they helped us on this too. So it was Americans and Canadians in this battle. They were ready to take Kiska. They show up to Kiska, ready for a fight, but the Japanese had abandoned it. They saw what happened on Attu, and they didn't want to be involved with that again. And so during the night, during the fog, they were able to get all their people off the island without any loss of life on their side and get out, and they just left all this stuff that's still there. So that ended the Japanese occupation of the Aleutian Islands. And so for the rest of the war, it was just kind of waiting out the time up there. It was just patrols and hanging out. It wasn't a very exciting duty post after that. And that was about it. So after the war to 1950, it was just kind of designated a caretaker status. And again, not a whole lot going on. But then in 1950, they transferred it over to the Navy. So during the war, it was the Army Air Corps, which became the Air Force. And then in 1950, the Air Force transferred it over to the Navy. And then in the 50s, of course, the Cold War starts. We're close to Russia. So we're going to start listening to Russia. We're going to start looking for Russian submarines. We're going to start doing all these top secret things up here because we're close to Russia. So they start out with, 200 or 300 personnel up there, but it slowly accumulates until there's, I think at its height in the 80s, there were about 6,000 people up there between military personnel, civilians, families, contractors, all those people on the island. So there's two main areas. If we zoom in on our little map here, we've got the Naval Air Facility, which is what's known as downtown, and it was up on this hill. And then down below that, they had Navy housing. And I wanted to show you guys some satellite map, but Google Maps is like freaking out right now and it's all black. So I don't know, we'll look at it in a bit and see if it works. But they had that was their city out there, their city limits. And then the Navy Communications Station, which is where my dad was stationed, and it was pretty separated from town. This Clam Lagoon, it was kind of remote out there, and this is what it looked like out there. So there is, yeah, it's a lot of the roads are unpaved out there. There's about 16 miles of road out there, and some of them you can't pass them anymore. They're not passable anymore. So I'll show you what one of the bridges looks like in a little bit. But yeah, we have this road goes all the way out there. This road is no longer passable. This bridge, I'll show you what it looks like. We tried to go out this way, but it became all potholed and, it got washed out, and we didn't want to get our rental truck stuck because it would probably not be getting out. We don't want the brand new truck that the guy got. This road, you can't get out here anymore. And then, some of these, like this area, you're not even allowed to go. This red area is closed because there's unexploded ordnance out there potentially. So there's a gate out here, and you can't go out there anyway. So then in the mid-90s, after the Soviet Union collapses, they decided they're going to close the base, and they start doing a drawdown. When did you go up there? About that time? Yeah. That's shotgun. Shotgun? Oh, it's the shotgun top secret area. I don't know what they did out there, but they called it shotgun. Yeah. He said the inside of it was totally lined with copper. and they thought that they were using it to talk to the submarines. So, and I was reading about, when I was doing research for this talk, they found that some of their listening stuff worked a little better than they thought, and they were able to hear some of our subs that were supposed to be not detectable, and they almost gave away the location of some of our subs when they were publishing some of this information, and somebody who knew where our subs were was like, do not publish that. So it's kind of interesting because, you know, the people putting that information out didn't know because these were top secret subs. So yeah, it was interesting. The population in 2020 was 171, but that has gone down. They did have a fish processing plant in up there, but COVID killed it, and they've been trying to bring it back, but so far have not been successful. And other than that, there's not a whole lot of industry up there. I think probably the biggest one is tourism for hunting and fishing. People go up there to do that. When we flew out, I think I was one of the only women on the plane. There were a lot of hunters and fishermen going out on the plane, and there's a lot of outfitters out there. Not a lot, there's probably like 3 or 4. And this was what I wanted.
So do they have lodges, these outfitters?
Yeah, well, not really lodges. What they've done is they've restored some of the old Navy housing, and you can stay in it. And so let's see, I think I have, well, so let me back up here. So people will go up for hunting and fishing, they'll go up for birding, and then veterans will come up to see, you know, where they used to be. So this is Dad, 50 years apart. Him and his friend Joel had their own little car rental business while they were up there. He was a CV, so he knew how to fix cars, and they spent a lot of time plowing snow and fixing things and stuff like that. So, but anyway, that's why we went up there, was because Dad wanted to go see it again. So that's me and my boyfriend Brian and Dad, his name's Jack, and we went up there. And I think, yeah, I wanted to show you guys a map, but I think Google Maps is, you can see, it looks like there's a lot of houses there. And there are a lot of houses there, but a lot of them are in really terrible shape. And I do have some pictures of what they look like. But like I said earlier, a lot of the outfitters they've restored some of these houses so that you can stay in them. And you can get a truck, they'll rent you a truck, and then they'll take you out on a boat to go fishing, they'll take you out and drop you off, and you can go caribou hunting or bird hunting or whatever you want to do. Dad just wanted to go out and see, you know, where he used to work, and so we got our truck and off we went out onto the roads. Dad knew where he was going, so I loved all these dead power poles. They were all over the place, and it was funny when we shot this video. It was really bumpy, but my phone has a really good camera, and so we were trying to show like how bumpy it was so we could send it to his Navy buddy and be like, look, you need to come out and grade the road. But it was really, the camera was really smooth, so the joke didn't quite work when we sent it to him. So again, that was out here, which was further out from kind of civilization. And when we drove, we drove out this road, and this is about here. where that bridge was I was telling you about, and this is what the road turns into. No more road. Turns into a big sand dune. So we got out and we walked, and this is the bridge. That's Candlestick Bridge. It goes over this little inlet, and you can see the tide is just ripping under there. And it goes into Clam Lagoon. Oh, it's working on your phone. That's interesting.
Google Earth.
Oh, Google Earth app.
And
Yeah.
yeah, you can zoom in.
Yeah.
Could you walk across that bridge?
We did not try. I don't know. Maybe if you're brave, but yeah, we didn't want to walk across that. There were a couple of eagles out on the other end when we first got there, but yeah, I don't know if I'd be brave enough to walk across it. So yeah, if you were able to drive across this and you continued on, there was Zito Point out there, and I'm not sure what they used to do out at Zito Point, but there were a couple of buildings out there, and that was an area where some people were stationed. So then we turned around and we kept going on, and this is the communication station from across Clam Lagoon. And then you get closer, Dad said it looked pretty similar to what it looked like in 1975. It hasn't changed a whole lot. And then of course, he made us all cry when we first got there because he brought that all the way from home for his dog. That's him and Chuck back in 1975, and he brought a cross for Chuck up there. So that's done for him.
How long was he out there?
Dad was there from 72 to 75. So, and then this is Chuck's view out there across the lagoon. So it's really beautiful out there. And then there's Dad in front of the old CB workshop. So the CBs kept the roads open, they kept the machines running, and did all that kind of stuff. This was the office that he was standing in that first picture. And here it is again. So things are falling in, things are falling apart, stuff's growing everywhere. This is the shop inside where they would work. And there's him in that same room working on a snowplow. So big machinery that they had to work on. And here's more of the shop. We've got a nice rotary phone right there. But yeah, this shop was taken over by another division, which I can't remember, steelworkers maybe, he told me, after the CBs ended up in a different shop, which we found the next day. But yeah, lots of furniture just left, broken glass, busted out doors everywhere. And then these are the barracks, so we were able to go inside those. But you have to be careful because I went in that door, first thing I saw was this big, huge hole. So you have to watch where you're going, prop open any doors you go through, so you don't get stuck. Because, you know, if you get trapped in there, nobody's gonna know you're missing. So just be really careful if you go out and explore something like this. We had there's some doors that have been smashed off. There were bullet holes and stuff. I mean,
So there was a lot of vandalism?
Yeah, unfortunately.
By whom?
Vandalism probably by visitors and maybe some islanders, who knows. Yeah, people come up there and some people just want to smash things, unfortunately. Yeah. So, and also, you know, the elements too. I didn't put it in here, but I got this really cool video of standing in the hallway of the barracks and you can hear the wind just whistling through. It's a really eerie sound. But the elements up there are pretty harsh on it too.
How long were you there?
We were there for 3 days because we flew in on, I think, Wednesday, and then the next plane out was Saturday. So it was either that or stay a week. So
Did they still have caribou there?
yeah, but we didn't see any. So we didn't see any caribou.
Is the school building in by condition?
The school, I don't know, but the school shut down because they don't have enough kids.
Yeah, they just finished the school before the Navy shut it down.
Oh, yeah, I heard that the school shut down in 2023, so they held on for a while. But this is one of the barracks. They think, we guessed that they were like 4-man rooms. Dad said they were a lot nicer than when he was up there. But yeah, a lot of furniture that was left behind. This is the rec room. So yeah, a little bit of furniture left behind in there too, but yeah, again, falling apart, moldy. But it was neat getting a tour from Dad. the buildings have these tunnels, or not tunnels, but like passageways in between them, because if it's nasty and blowing, it's nice to be able to walk in between the buildings without getting out the elements. So these pass through in between all the buildings out there. This is inside the chow hall. This is in the kitchen. A lot of that had been stripped out. There wasn't a whole lot left in there. This is the walk-in freezer. Some of the doors have been ripped off. Some old filing cabinets in there. This was all inside the chow hall building. And then there's Brian modeling some huge mixers that somebody had put in their front yard as lawn decorations. So, yeah, that's making food for a lot of people. This is inside the old gym. You can see some of the flooring has been stripped away. This is smashed. And then it's hard to see, but this is a big warp in the floor. And it was probably this high that it had been warped from like moisture or something. So that's it. They used to watch movies in here for 25 cents. And there he is in his old seat. It was his favorite seat, he said. So there's a picture of him in there. You had to have some good flashlights to go in there too, because obviously there's no electricity in there, and some of the areas were very dark. We found the old bowling alley. It had been boarded up, and someone had smashed a hole into the wall so that you could see where the bowling alley was, because they had just kind of covered it up. And we found the old ptarmigan bar where people, they'd go hang out, and a bunch of returning veterans had written their names on the wall, like when they'd been stationed there and they had come back, so Dad added his name to it. So we found some old phone booths. These are the old mailboxes, peeling paint everywhere. I think this is the back of the power plant. Dad was very excited to show Brian some giant engines that were in there, but unfortunately they were gone, and he was really disappointed. This was a big boiler in there, so I was like, well, I guess that'll do. It was a giant boiler. But we did find some giant engines at a different power plant, so they got to see their giant engines. That's Brian sitting next to one of them. I think there were 3 or 4 in this building. So they had these huge power plants out there. And yeah, it was just really cool seeing all these places and getting the tour from Dad. And after we kind of seen all this stuff, it was starting to get dark, so we went back to our house that we were staying in. And the next day, Dad was on a mission. He wanted to find some of the old machines that he used to drive. And so this was not the right one, unfortunately. We didn't find that one, but this was the one he was looking for. But we didn't find it, but he did find one that he used to drive, if you can believe it. It was sitting next to the road out in the middle of nowhere. We just happened to drive by and see it, and he went out and looked at it and figured out that it was this vehicle. He said the heater didn't work on it. Dad joke, right? He said they used it one time to get this thing out, I mostly put this in here because I love the reaction shot from Dad at having to deal with the mess of getting that out. But yeah, he said they spent a lot of time dealing with snow up there. This is the 100 Knot Shop. It's the one store in town. It's only open a couple days a week, if you're lucky. This is what's inside, not a whole lot. Nothing fresh. Everything's packaged and pretty expensive. I think I bought like one of those like movie packages of Whoppers. It was like, I don't know, $5 or something. So we also went to the Tundra Tavern. This is what it looks like inside. It's open I think it's kind of one of those if we feel like it were open type of places. And it happened to be open that night. And there's Brian enjoying his $12 can of beer. And then I think our burgers were like $25 or something. I don't remember. They were pretty expensive. They were tasty, but so yeah, pretty spendy. What does that look like? Not Pizza Hut. McDonald's, yeah. So the Navy has a contract with McDonald's. The Army, we got Burger King. But this was what at one time was the westernmost McDonald's in the United States. It was boarded up tight, we couldn't get inside, but the old menu is still there. So the Big Mac, $2.45 there. Kind of expensive for 1995, but it was way over there in Alaska. So
My dad lived out there for a year,
Oh, yeah?
and the big, he was gonna get paid all this money to live out there, and he was gonna send money home to help support us. And it was so expensive that very little money ever came home.
Was he in the Navy when he lived up there?
No, he was up there for construction. There was a big secret project going on.
Oh, okay.
It was something about communications or something.
Huh.
He went up there for the construction.
Okay, oh, cool.
But yeah,
Yep.
I just thought it was funny because the amount of money that they spent to live there was
Yeah.
outrageous.
Yep. Yeah. We when we went up there, we brought some goodies to our host. Because it's hard to get stuff. We asked him, "What do you need?" He's like, "Some bread and tomatoes." So we brought him some goodies from Anchorage when we went out there. Another interesting thing we saw up there is the Bering Hill Chapel, which unfortunately looks like it doesn't have many more years left standing. This was built in 1941, 42, I can't remember, in the 40s. It was interesting. I saw that they at one time had gotten a grant to restore this, but I don't know what happened because obviously it did not get restored. It's just falling apart. And the housing, this is some of the Navy housing, and the wind and the elements have just ripped it apart. So there were a few different styles of housing out there. Some of these ones, the walls were just ripped off from the wind. There were some that had burned down. These, I think, were a little newer. Some of them, like the roof was ripped off of one of the garages. We went inside a few of them. We were not brave enough to go upstairs in any of them, but they all were just falling apart. But it is a beautiful place. But even, we went down on the beach, and even there, like, we came upon what I think was the back end of a dump because we found an old faucet on the beach. There are signs everywhere, all over the island. Do not dig here. Landfill, asbestos, like everywhere, all over the island. So there's a lot of places where it's like, just be careful, don't dig. There's also the potential for, they have these anti-personnel things during the war. They were these big spikes that they just stick in the tundra. And they tried to remove them all, but there could be some still out there. So they're like, especially if you're in the more remote areas, they say be careful if you're out there.
So was anybody monitoring you?
No, not that we know of anyway.
So they had to trust that you would do good.
Yep. So, it's kind of like a, what's the word? At your own risk, and if you want to be a Darwin Award candidate, then that's on you. So,
do you have any photos of the housing you stayed in?
I did not take any pictures of the house that I stayed in because we ended up staying in somebody's house who actually lived there. The company had gotten overbooked, and so I didn't feel right taking pictures of somebody's house. But I can show you guys some pictures of some more housing. I do have some other pictures, not in this presentation, but when we're done, I can show you guys some more pictures too. They're duplexes. A lot of them are duplexes. But yeah, just like there's remnants everywhere. If you, like I said, if you go on Google Maps, you can see scars on the landscape of old landing strips, stuff like this, where like the concrete is there, but the buildings are gone, or there's just piles of junk. But again, it is beautiful out there. So yeah, very interesting place. There's like this kind of like undercurrent of energy of like all the things that used to be there. This is Finger Bay. So this is kind of about as far out as you can get going the other way from town. So, Clam Lagoon's out this way, Finger Bay's out this way. They went, Brian and Dad went fishing out here, walking along the beach. And then this is, I think, kind of going up the other way from Finger Bay. But yeah, just it's beautiful out there, and I would go back, but it's expensive. But it's a beautiful place to explore. This is the base out there again where we were, and there's a recreation site over there, and then I think like over here is that unexploded ordnance area where you're not able to go. So, but yeah, you you guys have any other questions or?
How long is this island and what?
I
know it's very irregular, but
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look that up because I don't remember how far it was to get out there. It wasn't like an all-day drive to get from one base to the other. It was like half an hour maybe, if that. So, I mean, and that's just because the road was gravel and you got to drive slow too. So distance-wise, it's not that big of an island. So, but the terrain is just rough.
So was there fresh water available?
Yeah, there's lots of lakes. So these are freshwater lakes.
Okay.
There's one there. There's lots of freshwater lakes.
But otherwise, that's ocean.
This is saltwater, yeah.
Salt,
So this
yeah.
is Clam Lagoon. So that bridge we saw is kind of down here. And so the ocean comes in underneath that bridge and fills up this lagoon. So, yeah.
I've been wondering what there was about this island that had made the military select it. Was it the biggest one? Was it change?
It's got a good harbor, nice deep harbor, so they can get big ships into it. Yeah, I don't know if we've got, let me see if I can go back to that map. This bay, they can get big ships in here. So, yeah.
How far is it from Alaska, or from Russia?
That I'm not sure about mileage-wise either. We had that satellite picture. Yeah, Russia's over here. This is the Kamchatka Peninsula. So, yeah, pretty close. And of course, you know, this is Siberia, so it's not the most populated part of Russia, but still, it's Russia.
So my when my dad was there in, like, I'm thinking 50, 54, 55, he was there for a year, and it was all military. He wasn't military, but, you know, so they fed them, and they fed them steak, a lot of steak. And so they would just throw it out the windows. Well, that's what he said, you know. And there was lots and lots of fox.
Oh, foxes, yes.
Yes, so I wondered if the foxes are still there.
No, that's a good question. So they did introduce foxes on the island in an attempt to control the rats, I think. Because they're, no?
The Russians put the foxes there because they were going to try and bring them for fur.
Oh, for fur. Okay, yes. There was a rat problem too. But the foxes...
There's 3 terrestrial mammals. There are caribou, the Arctic fox, and the Arctic rat.
Yes, and they've removed all the foxes, or at least they have tried to. The story is that they have removed all the foxes because they were negatively affecting the bird population, which the birds were native. So, yeah. And cats, feral cats, too. So, those are also an issue with the bird population as well. So, yeah. Any other questions?
did you see any feral cats?
We did not. I didn't see any cats at all. The whole time I was in Alaska. We also went to Anchorage and Seward, and I didn't see any cats. So, yep.
What was the name of the company that you booked your stays with and your apartments with?
Adak Lodge. Yep. And they was great. Chris was the owner. He met us there at the airport, and, you know, here's the car, you know, drove us out to where we were supposed to go, and yeah, they were awesome. Super nice guy.
And that included your meals?
No, we brought meals. So we brought, we actually ended up bringing more than we thought we would need. We brought like those backpacking meals where you can bring like MRE, stuff like that. And then they caught a fish one day, so we had fish, we had a salmon one night. And then Chris, because we brought him a bunch of stuff, like we brought him some bread and some Oreos and things, he gave us a whole caribou, like steak or, you know, thing of caribou, yeah. So we had caribou one night, which we didn't even eat, you know, all the food that we brought with us because of that. So that was nice of him. But yeah, you need to bring food. I would bring your own food because you don't know if the store's going to be open. You know, we brought all that kind of easy stuff to pack, light stuff, like backpacking stuff.
What do you do for water?
The water there is drinkable. It's questionable whether there's lead in the water or not. They also did not want us to flush our toilet paper, so we had garbage cans next to the toilet paper because the septic systems are really old, and if it breaks, there's not really anybody to fix it. They do have Public Works Department, but it's probably like 3 guys or something. And if something breaks, you know, they got to get supplies from down here or somewhere. They got to get it all the way up there. They probably got to get people to come up and fix it. So very expensive. They don't have a lot of money. They had a sign on one of there was another, so they had the Bering Hill Church up there. There was another church up there that was built later that they used after that one became unusable or something. I don't know. There was another church up there, but there was a sign on the church that there was a tsunami stash up there, like, you know, we have tsunami stashes here, and that church was off limits because of vandalism, and I don't know if people had destroyed the tsunami cache too, but there was a problem with that. So, you know, obviously a town of 170 people or less is not going to have a lot of money to fix things. So, yeah, they got to be real cautious about what they have. I think it's generators, but I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. They do have a contract with AT&T, so if you have AT&T, your phone will work right in town, and that's it. So my phone worked up there for a very limited area.
Do you have pictures of this town?
Let me see if I can get some other pictures on here, because I do have.
What'd your dad think about going back?
I think he liked it, but it was not. It was a little hard, I think. You know, it was emotional because it was. You know, it's hard to see it all falling apart, and.
My dad kind of talked about how lonely it was.
Yeah.
There's just not a whole lot happening. And of course, they didn't have, that was 53. They didn't have movies or, you know, anything.
Yeah.
My dad did a lot of drinking up there.
Probably.
Yeah, he says that's basically, he goes, we go bowling, he goes, he's not a bowler, he'd go bowling and they'd have a movie once a week and he drank. That was it. That was pretty much the extent of his year.
They probably played poker too.
I'm
Yeah,
sure that's
at
what my dad
bars,
did.
yeah. Bar, play pool, play poker.
Maybe fish.
So these are some of the old housing there. I don't know if I can make this bigger. Is that big enough? Can you guys see? Am I in the way?
That's what I saw in the paper was the housing, and I thought, why does that look so familiar?
Yeah.
It wasn't that picture, but it was a different house of the jet of the.
I might have to stand here and do this, so hopefully I'm not in your way.
The quantits and stuff. Like
Yeah.
That. Oh my God.
So yeah, they're just getting torn apart there.
Well, you know, they get damp and because of no heat,
Mm-hmm.
then that weakens them, they leak.
I wonder if this will.
Wind.
So these are some of those other houses. They had these like weird little sunroom things like here. And then I do have some pictures from inside. Oh, this is that shotgun building, the one with the stuff around it that you were talking about. And we were able to go inside. We didn't go too far inside because it was very dark and it was very wet in there. So lots of water on the floor.
So you went prepared with huge flashlights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we knew we were going to need them in there. So this is inside that church. We kind of just took a picture through the wall. This building, we didn't get a chance to go inside this one, but that one had a bigger theater and a swimming pool. I think I'm standing right in front of this. Swimming pool, another theater, and like a bunch of other stuff, but we didn't go inside that one. We didn't have time.
Schools were?
That was all kind of down in the main part of town. So they had like City Hall and the post office and the school were all in the same building. The 100 Knot shop that I showed you guys a picture of, that one used to be a preschool at one time. But I don't think I have pictures of the main part of town, which is why I was kind of annoyed that Google Maps is crapping out on us. Oh, we found this in the parking lot right as I stepped out of the truck. That was in the parking lot.
Is that a what?
It's a watch, and the back was gone. So I was hoping it was engraved with something, but the back was gone. So housing. Oh yeah, I saw this cool jelly in the bay there. There's Brian and his fish. He's very excited. Let's see. Oh yeah, we went around and walked through the housing. So this is inside one of the houses.
You were there in June or July?
August. Yeah, kind of late August.
There were no seals or sea lions.
Well, we saw 2 seals in Clam Lagoon, but that was it. But we did see quite a few sea otters. So these houses seem to have fared the best. They were in the best shape out of any of them. Most of those were fairly intact, but the rest of them were just falling apart. Yeah, that one looks like a dollhouse. I guess those are all the housing shots I have. Oh, these are some other, you can kind of see the housing underneath the mountain there. So these houses were the ones that we were staying in. So they had some of these that they had restored that we stayed in. And then they had taken over one of like I think it was an old gym that they used to keep their fleet of vehicles in. The outfitter did. This is the other base. This is the air base. So this is the new church here. So the Bearing Church, that might be it there, the one that's falling apart. And then we didn't go in too many of these buildings. This is I think this might be the runway. Yeah, because I took this picture through the fence at the airport. So.
Is that the Alaska Airlines runway?
Yeah, I've got a picture of the plane too if you want to see what, I mean, it's a regular plane. I was surprised.
And
yeah.
was it full?
It was fuller than I thought it would be.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's huge.
Yep. So.
Well, if it only runs twice a week.
Yeah, and when you get off the plane, there's this sign greets you, birthplace of the winds.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I think that's probably most of the stuff I have to share. So thank you guys for coming. If you want to stay and ask any other questions, feel free. But yeah, it's a really fascinating place, and hopefully you'll get to go check it out someday. So.